Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week I'm going to discuss the third episode from Ahsoka titled Time to Fly. Before we get started, I'm inviting you to join the conversation with us. We can be found on Twitter and Hive at Force Ghost Pod. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok just by searching Force Ghost Conversations. Also, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your listening site of choice. Plus, Force Ghost Conversations is live on Patreon. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to consider pledging your support, there will be a link in the episode description for you to check out the various tiers offered. Finally, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it's time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. Okay, everybody, welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations. And yes, we are continuing our Ahsoka coverage here, going week by week, episode by episode of this incredible series. But before we get into our episode 3 conversation, let's talk through some news. Yes, Cloud City Gossip is back for the first time in several months. For our listeners who may have joined us during the pandemic, Cloud City Gossip is appropriately dubbed as our news section. So if there's any news in the Star Wars, Lucasfilm, or adjacent galaxies, then we will be covering it to some degree in Cloud City Gossip. So this is usually about a couple minutes where we just run through the basic news of the last week, or weeks, depending on when the last time I did it was, and then we will get into the main chunk of our episode. So let's start off by announcing that Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is now available on Disney+. If you have not had the chance to see it yet, what are you doing? Go do so now. There is also a new documentary on Indiana Jones and Harrison Ford on Disney+, which you can watch afterwards. Plus, then you can go back and listen to our episodes breaking down the movie in great length and detail. So you don't want to miss out on all that. So maybe we didn't get a chance to go see it in this theater. Maybe you didn't go to a drive-in to see it like we did here at Force Ghost Conversations. Whatever your way of seeing it, whether it be on your iPad, your iPhone, or maybe you have a home media entertainment console, now's the time. Put on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and you won't be disappointed. Trust me, it's a great movie. Yeah, that's it on that one. So second, congrats to Dave Filoni and Carrie Beck on their promotions within Lucasfilm. Dave is now the Chief Creative Officer and Carrie is the Head of Development. So I look forward to seeing what they cook up in these new positions, and I'm very excited to see just overall what they do, because they're going to have a bit more of a hand in the creative and the overall choice of the products, or the projects, I should say, that are coming to fruition. The interesting thing that I'm noticing in this discourse here is that a lot of people are talking about the Star Wars element of it all, but this is a Lucasfilm position, so that obviously would include Indiana Jones, Willow, American Graffiti, technically THX 1138. If they want to do anything else beyond any of those IPs, they would have a hand in that process. So I'd be very intrigued to see what they do beyond Star Wars, beyond the galaxy far, far away, to see what they're able to cook up overall. But congrats to them, and I look forward to seeing what they are able to do in these new positions. Third, the High Republic has now entered Phase 3. Yes, the release of The Eye of Darkness by George Mann took place very recently, and if you're a fan of the High Republic, I'm hearing that this is a story you cannot miss. Now, seeing that the High Republic is in Phase 3, that may seem daunting to some folks who maybe not have joined in at any start of a phase for the previous iterations, but no need to worry. Phase 1 is great, Phase 2 is great too, and the High Republic is a plethora of great stories that I'm sure you can find your entryway into that galaxy very soon. Or easily, I should say, not very soon, because that's not a time thing. But you get what I'm saying here. You'll find a way to get in. Just try and probe this different stories. Maybe do some research on the different authors and the stories overall, like the plot blurbs. I've been reading just about everything up to this point in the High Republic. I've got The Eye of Darkness coming very soon. I've got it on order, and I look forward to reading it very as soon as possible, frankly, once it arrives. I just finished phase 2 last week during the Thanksgiving holiday, and it was great. So I can't wait to get back to some of the main characters from phase 1, which phase 3 really picks up soon after the events of the conclusion of phase 1. So with that, folks, that is all the Cloud City gossip news that I compiled for this week. We'll be back on the other side of this very short break with our Ahsoka Episode 3 discussion. All right, folks, welcome back. It is time now to get into our Episode 3 discussion of Ahsoka. And this episode is called Time to Fly, and it was directed by Steph Green and written, of course, by Dave Filoni. Time to Fly seems like it's an appropriately dubbed episode for what we got here. A lot of it takes place in space. A lot of it is flying. There's a good amount of action in this episode. And I will tell you now, I'm going to spoil it because this conversation is going to be at the end of this episode here. But if you were to ask me, like, as soon as the episode concluded weeks ago when it first came out, I may not have been so high on this episode. I might have been probably pretty disappointed that I had to wait another week for an episode, given what we got here. So I guess the grand question is this episode really like at, I don't want to say like at fault, but is it a victim of the week-to-week release? So we'll table that discussion for the end here. But there certainly is a lot to discuss and talk about within this episode. So I just want to really geek out for a moment here with all of you. How cool is it to see not only just Sabine in live action, but she is training with a lightsaber. With Huang, no less. Right, this crazy droid that helps put together lightsabers for over 500 years with Jedi younglings that is now passing on some of those trainings and teachings on to Sabine Wren, a character that is known and beloved from Star Wars Rebels, let alone in a show called Ahsoka featuring one of the greatest characters of the galaxy far, far away. I mean, that would just be a great treat to begin with here. But later in the episode, too, we get a plethora of other characters from the galaxy far, far away interjected into this story. Chancellor Mothma, yes, Mon Mothma, reprised by Genevieve O'Reilly from Andor and Rogue One, and a deleted scene of Revenge of the Sith. She's Chancellor now. How great is that? Jason Syndulla, right? The son of Hera and Kanan. What? Really? That's awesome. Plus Chopper too. I mean, that's also great. We got to see him in episode 2, but we get to see him a little bit more in this episode. Kaz's dad too, from Senator Ziono from Kaz, of course, Kaz Ziono from Star Wars Resistance, and you get to see his father in this story, and of course he plays a bit more of a role in Resistance and serves a big major part for Kaz's arc in that story. But we get to see him at the forefront of this episode here as well. So it's really it's wonderful that we're now at this point of Star Wars storytelling where we're starting to see a lot of the overlap. This is what you want in a connected, shared galaxy that it is. I know people always have this criticism that whenever they see a character pop up that's from something else, they're always like, oh, the galaxy's too small. Or they see a planet pop up again. Like, everything has to take place on this story, right? I've heard that criticism a lot. Tatooine doesn't have to be in every movie. I don't care if it is. It makes sense that they go back to this place where they constantly like have dealings and these characters come up again, right? If Chancellor Mothma is important to the story, they will add her into the tale. If Hera is important, she'll be there, right? That's why in the Rogue One, you get all those great detail bits of like Rebels references to the prequels, references to the original trilogy. This is a shared galaxy, and we shouldn't fault creators if they want to create using characters that already exist in the universe if it makes sense to the story. That's why they have a story group. They're there to kind of help shepherd. Well, this character is off on this planet during this time in in the story, so it doesn't make sense to use them, or it does make sense to use them, and then this is how we can kind of help craft that tale together, right? That is the point of shared narratives, shared universes, cinematic tales, all that fun stuff. End of my tirade there. I think you get the point that I'm for having these characters, and if you want to add a new one, great too. That's fine as well. But also don't hinder storytelling if it means including a character that already exists. So now that I've done my geeking out, I want to ask a question here. We see Sabine at the beginning of the episode training. She's kind of relearning some of the basic skills that Ahsoka taught her some time ago before she quit training. Even though Huang is still kind of ribbing her on being the worst Jedi that he's ever seen, the one with the least amount of Force use ever, all that great stuff. Is Ahsoka being a good teacher, is the question. Is she kind of holding back? I think yes. She's telling her the things that she needs to hear, right? Focus, attention, mastery of the Force takes time, discipline. You have to commit yourself to it. The tone just isn't there, though. There's nothing warm about what Ahsoka is saying. It's very dry. It's cold. Nothing like it is an open invitation to Sabine saying like, you're doing a good job. This is what you need to do as a reminder. Keep working with it. I think if she had told maybe her own, like a story of her own experiences with Anakin, right? How she had to deal with a similar instance in her upbringing and training. That's how you connect. That's how you forge a relationship. The master and apprentice bond needs to be prevalent and strong in order for learning to commence. There needs to be a shared trust with each other, and it doesn't seem like there's trust at all between the two of them. I think that's pretty evident from the material that we're presented with. But it seems like Sabine is at least putting forth an effort to a great degree. She's put up her end of the bargain, if you ask me. They basically said in episode 2, "Are you in? Now's the time. Join us. You have to start doing X again, and if you want to come along." So she's doing that part. I get it. It's frustrating. She wants to have a little bit of instant gratification, or at least some sense of the success of the fruits of her labor. But perhaps Ahsoka could be a bit more welcoming in terms of how she presents herself as teacher to Sabine during her struggle in trying to at least see that a Jedi opportunity path is available for her. So I think Ahsoka is failing her in a bit there, and obviously this stuff is going to come up in episodes 4, 5, and 6, particularly of this series, where Ahsoka is clearly feeling the weight and burden of being Anakin Skywalker's Padawan. That is something that she will need to overcome herself and forgive herself for and move on with. Like, there's an acceptance that needs to be done there before she's not only holding herself back, but maybe she's just afraid to teach because she'd be teaching on the lessons of Anakin and continuing that lineage, which she feels like she had a part of. She feels like she's, taken on some of that, right? Everything that he's taught and is now within her. He turned to that great evil. Is she a part of that great evil too? And those are difficult questions that she's going to confront later on. Right. But like I've mentioned in the first couple of episodes, Ahsoka is certainly stagnating. And the fact that she's not even able to meet 50% or even 25 or even frankly 10%, if you ask me, of the way to Sabine and her training and just to be a supporting mentor figure at this time, then we've got a long ways to go. And we're going to talk about those in subsequent episodes when it comes to the series. But she's just certainly distant as a teacher, as a mentor, as someone that's supposed to be a master of the Jedi arts and the ways of the Jedi, even though she's not a Jedi. it's just not connecting and clicking there in the way that it could be, which is a little frustrating for me. Now, I want to say Kaz's dad is a real tool. And that's putting it plainly there. They did, that whole council when Hera is basically saying that Thrawn, there are rumblings of Thrawn, all that stuff, and they're just picking and prodding at her, like, yeah, they're outliers in the system. There's people at every level of the galaxy, of the Galactic New Republic, that are former Empire allegiances, or have allegiances to the Empire, and formerly. It's just wild to me how a trusted general from the Galactic Civil War is kind of disregarded for clearly seeing a problem, raising it, and then told just like, don't worry about it, it's fine. How could they have been so blind to what is going on around outside of them? Maybe, frankly, some of the Shadow Empire elements have infiltrated this cabinet too, which is horrible. It's great. It's crazy to think that, when I used to think of the post before Disney bought Star Wars and they did episode 7, 8, and 9, I had such high hopes in my head. And I know there was the EU legends and all that stuff, but if you weren't into that, you just had your own headcanon to create the story for how they rebuild a New Republic after episode 6. And I'd read the Thrawn trilogy and many other books, so I knew what was going on in Legends. But there's also part of me that was like, yeah, George doesn't necessarily believe in these stories. So, like, in my head, and I assume in his head too, they're doing XXX in terms of creating this New Republic after the events of Return of the Jedi, which I always had high hopes for. So to see such ludicrous idiocracy permeate into the bastion of the New Republic system, it's just wild to me how they could just let it foster and grow. And we saw that in The Mandalorian, especially, I believe it was episode 3 or 4 when they did with Pershing, showing about how the clearly out the system is broken when it comes to rehabilitating former Imperial officers and troopers into the New Republic, and they're at every level. And this is how you get to the First Order. This is how you get to the heir to the Empire problem that's going to be with Thrawn later on. This is how you get to the events of Episode 7, where you literally see the New Republic get destroyed on Hosnian Prime by Starkiller Base. The through line is already there, and again, it's a little frustrating to see this come to play. But I did love seeing Hera lose her cool, especially when pushed on the Ezra point, right, where they're like, "Is this just a personal crusade to go see, like, track down potentially the whereabouts of Ezra Bridger? Do you just want New Republic resources for your own personal gain?" So seeing her lose her cool there goes against kind of some of the quote unquote wet blanket criticisms, in my opinion, of this character, where she's just a mom that kind of tells the kids no, they can't do this, when right, the kids meaning Ezra, Sabine, Seb, telling them not to get into trouble and to do all that stuff, kind of a one or two dimensional level character where she's just a mom and nothing else, right? She is showcasing a bit more range and depth, if you ask me, when it comes to that stuff there. So the cup was a great comedic bit again. I did like the training kind of montage again, going back to the Ahsoka Sabine, or not so the Ahsoka Sabine kind of training portions there. The lesson there is important, where training and focus are what truly defines one's success. So I think that is true to all aspects of life. You have to start small, be patient, be diligent, give your best effort, be okay with failing at first. You're not going to get it 100% right every time, but keep trying again and again. And if it works, great, keep going. And if it doesn't work, also try to keep going, tinker around, change things up. This is where it gets great about Star Wars again, is that it is still at its core a coming of age story for 12-year-olds and for the 12-year-old in each and every one of us, right? This is a mythology taking place in a galaxy far, far away, a fairy tale, if you will, that allows people to see situations and characters put into situations that are reminiscent of our world in some way, and then to, in a safe way, learn an appropriate lesson that is good for all of life. That is mythology at its core. So at the end of the day, when it comes to us learning a new skill or keeping perseverance, when it comes to everything that we do, whether it's work, life, building relationships, training and focus are what truly defines one's success. Now, most of the episode after that involves getting to the Denab system, and then some great action bits with Ahsoka's ship getting chased by Shin Hati and Merrick, finding the big ring that the hyperdrive was meant for from episode 2 that will eventually take Morgan Elsbeth, Balin Skull, Shin Hati, and others to Peridia to find Thrawn. Now we see this thing. We have some great action sequences in like the space battles in Above the Planet, which certainly had some great New Hope vibes. And I found that the coolest part of the action in this episode for me was Ahsoka out in space, literally putting all caution to the wind, going out there and being bait basically for these fighters, allowing Hu Yang and Sabine to kind of fix the ship a bit more so that they can, after they kind of get shocked by the ion cannon, I think, that knocks out their power, so that they can get energy back into the ship so they can finally land it later on, because they've taken some big hits against those the ships of Merrick and Shin Hati, and of course the huge ring, the huge ring that's eventually going to take off. Frankly, it was something straight out of the Clone Wars. Just seeing Ahsoka out in space, we've seen that with several different episodes of the Clone Wars too, and even some Jedi can even survive, and Force users too can survive outside, as we've seen in the Last Jedi and for the Clone Wars too, in space without helmets on. Also, Rebels too, with the battle at the end of season 3. With Chopper Base and all that stuff. So great callbacks. It's certainly Filoni at his best, right? It's a especially when we get to see live action Purrgil again too, when they land on the ship, or not the ship, but they land the ship on the planet there. And again, this is all straight out of Clone Wars, Rebels. It's such a mix, right, of A New Hope clashing with the new elements of Filoni's brain. You're seeing all these elements, the Rebels characters, Purrgil, new characters created for this series, Balin Skull, Shin Hati, a little bit of the Mandalorian stuff too with Morgan Elsbeth, the Shadow Empire, Andor with Mon Mothma, and Resistance with Kaz's dad, mixing in with the tenor and tone of A New Hope, space dogfight sequences, right? I almost expected Sabine to say, "Great kid, don't get cocky." All that mixed together and intertwines into a great, what we call, I guess in my opinion, a Star Wars story. Now the ship lands, and Balin Skull says to Shin Hati, basically, go and take Merrick and find them where they landed, and make, just to ensure that there is no problems with them taking off. And that's where the episode ends. It kind of ends just abruptly on a cliffhanger. And I gotta tell you, when the episode came out, I was not thrilled with the ending right there. I was a little disappointed. The episode is really quick. It clocks in barely at 30 minutes, I think, with the credits and all that. Well, once you take out the credits and the intros and all that stuff. It's a very fast and quick episode. It's a quiet episode too at times. There isn't a whole lot. And then a lot of the last 10 minutes is just space dogfighting. So to have waited a full week after the 2 episodes to get this one, and then to know that there's going to be some great action sequences probably in the next one, I was just seething to get to the next episode. My patience was just non-existent at that point, which is my fault entirely. I'll admit that. I could have been better about all of those aspects overall, but I didn't, and that's how I was feeling at the time. Watching it 2 more times and another time in preparation for this episode here, knowing the full story arc and letting time to sit with it was a great thing. Because if I had gone on the microphone after watching it that first time, I may not have been so positive as we are right now. Which leads me to that question that I posed at the beginning of this episode here. Is this episode perhaps a victim of the week-to-week release? I think it was, at least for me at the time. There's nothing wrong with this episode. It is very fine. and not saying fine is a bad thing too. It's a good episode. It's a lot of fun. There's humor, there's action. There's great mythological storytelling. There's a lot of interconnected characters that show us that there's a larger story taking place here. It hits all of the checkmark beats that you would want. Except for that ending there, which just ends so abruptly, and then knowing I have to wait a full 7 days in order to see the next episode, which I know is going to be another banger one. I was just kind of like leaving. I felt unsatiated as a fan. However, if it were all released at once, or you're watching them in full succession, right, like I can do right now, I wouldn't have been so bothered because I would just go roll from the credits into the next one. So I think this is where you kind of can think through, like, all right, this is where the week-to-week could be hindered. I think overall the discussion online was great. People had loved this episode a lot, and they found the New Hope elements to be great, and to see some of those connective tissues between Rebels and Clone Wars into this in a live-action sense was fully appreciated. But that just abrupt cliffhanger there. There couldn't have been another 5 minutes of an extra battle to lead on or something like that beyond that. It really rubbed me the wrong way in that sense. But now that I'm able to just kind of sit, I've processed through the emotions of it, I can see and appreciate the full story that was meant to be on display here. And typically that can be the downside of when you are in this space of conversation, you miss that nuance there when you have to get in front of and tell your theories and thoughts and explain your ideas to an audience. It can be hindering it when it comes to that point and all that stuff there. So I think that's an appropriate conversation to have, and we're going to have some guests on over the next couple of weeks to continue our Ahsoka conversation. So be sure to continue to listen and keep up with our Ahsoka coverage here as we go week to week on Force Ghost Conversations. Now, of course, you can always find us Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever your favorite podcatcher is. Please continue to listen to us on those platforms. And also, leaving us a rating and review goes a long way to helping us beat the algorithm and to find more people, to grow the listener base, and continue to have great conversations among the Force Ghost Conversations campfire team that we have here. If you want, you can also continue the conversation with us on social media: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. I think I've mentioned them all. Or maybe I didn't mention Hive. But we're on all those platforms, and we'd love to continue having conversations about Ahsoka, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Willow. Let's talk about it all on those platforms there. So just search Force Ghost Conversations, and you'll find us in some capacity. Also, if you want to support the podcast in other means, we have a Patreon site where, for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to a ton of Force Ghost Conversations goodies, the chance to ask questions on the show, to share experiences, the ability to get extra episodes a month of Force Ghost Conversations. Those are all at your disposal on our Patreon site. So just click the link in the episode description, and you'll find our link to our site, and you can search for the various tiers that are available and find one that maybe supports the way that you want to give back to Force Ghost Conversations. We also have a T Public store where you can find merchandise. Again, a link is in the episode description. Where we have t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, iPhone cases, really anything you can think of in terms of merchandise, pillows, for goodness sake. And a Force Ghost Conversations logo can be put on that. We've got our Star Wars inspired logo, our Indiana Jones inspired logo, our Willow inspired logo. We're probably going to have some more designs in the coming months here, so be on the lookout for that. And we've got so much stuff coming in the Forest Coast Conversations catalog that I think you're going to be very excited for. So until next week, folks, thank you again for listening. May the Force be with you. Take care.